Hi, my name is Kara, and I no longer just knit. Guess who learned how to crochet? Literally the bare minimum. I now know how to make a granny square, but that's a lot more than I expected to do. I have been basically talking about learning how to crochet for the past 2 years, and every time I've started, it's been like a little bit hard, like my hand will cramp based on like how I need to hold the like yarn on the left and stuff, because you only hold the hook, but like something about holding the yarn would give me like a cramp, or like I would just get frustrated because it was taking a lot longer than I wanted it to, and like I would be like, yeah, I can knit this up in like half the time, so why don't I just knit something? And I just like have always thought in terms of knitting. But now that the weather is heating up a bit, I have started to think more about crochet, because I think that crochet is a little bit better suited for the summer than knitting is, because I think it's like a little bit holier. You tend to crochet more with cotton, not that I have, but like you tend to. I'm still working up the energy to learn how to crochet with cotton soon, but that's next on the list. And so yeah, I learned how to make a granny square, and I've gone wild. I basically just like sat with like a bunch of YouTube tutorials one day, and I just kind of forced myself to learn how to do it and just repeated it over and over and over again. I started out with this, I don't even have it here, but I started out with this Madeline Tosh like worsted or DK yarn that was plied, so it was easy to unravel, and I just kept on redoing it over and over and over again. In hindsight, it probably wasn't the best yarn to work with, just because it was pretty dark, so it's hard to see these stitches, especially if like me as an untrained crafter or as an untrained crocheter, like I couldn't figure out like what stitch was which. I still don't know for sure. I'm not very good at recognizing everything yet, because I can see knit stitches super easily. Crochet, very confusing. I'm still learning the eye and stuff, and I'm learning all the terms. Yeah, but this is the yarn that I ended up using. It's pretty thin. I am using an H hook or 5mm hook, and I've just been kind of going crazy with it. It's really pretty, but again, it's kind of dark, so you can't see the stitches super well. It's not that dark where you can't, but it's just dark enough where you're like, there's some ambiguity. But these are the granny squares that I learned how to make. Ooh, it looks so pretty. I don't know for sure if my technique is perfect, because I basically know only one crocheter in person, and I haven't been able to show her my work. I would love to go to the craft circles in New York, but I just really haven't found the time on the weekend, and I'm just being lazy, but I thought I'd share with you my crochet journey. So then once I figured out how to make a granny square, I got really excited, because it's pretty fun to use a bunch of your scrap yarn and just make like 1 million granny squares. Like, and I have so much scrap yarn of that like Wool and the Gang Feeling Good yarn and Sandnes Garn Kos, because they're both like chain fluff yarns, and I really loved holding it double to make it like a bulky weight yarn. But on its own, I think it's around an Aran or a DK. I'm not really sure. I'll look it up and put it in the description if I remember to. But I just kind of went crazy, and I just started making like a bunch of granny squares in different colors, because I just had a bunch of yarn, and I had a bunch of scrap yarn, and I thought it was really cute with a little white border. And this is like a project idea that I've had of just like using white yarn and just like creating a bunch of granny squares, or not even granny squares, but just like a scrap yarn project. And it's been really motivating to be like, yeah, like I can totally just crochet a bunch of granny squares. It's fun because they're all sort of self-contained. The tricky bit about like being in New York and commuting and stuff, and like you want to knit on the trains because you're going to be spending like 30 minutes every day like commuting to work or something, but like you're stressed about everything that's like touching the subway, or like you're just stressed that some things are going to fall out. But the beauty of granny squares is that they're so small, and they take me like 10 minutes to make. And so you can just like whip one out, like start and finish a whole like square on a train ride, and then you can just stick it in the bag and just like move on to the next one. So it never gets too big where like you're stressed about it falling out. And so you might have noticed that my hair is actually a lot lighter, and it's because I got it professionally done for the first time in like 2 years, all in preparation for my brother's wedding. And so my brother's wedding isn't until May, but I thought I'd give myself like a month buffer between like bleaching all of my hair and getting it like photos of my family and stuff, just because like if all of my hair fell out, I wanted some buffer period and some time to like figure out how to get used to it. But yeah, it's like super white right now, and it's kind of honestly lighter than I thought I wanted it to be. But it's good for the summer. It'll maybe look good in pictures, and I've been, like, when I put it in braids, I was just very, like, Targaryen, and honestly, like, after they, like, did, like, a full blowout and my hair was, like, super straight, I looked like Aemon Targaryen. Not even, like, any of the female Targaryens, I looked like Aemon Targaryen. But yeah, I have made about 25 of these little granny squares now in, like, various colors. I've done repeat colors. I actually did a bunch of granny squares. I did about, like, I want to say 10, maybe less. I don't even know. That seems ambitious to say 10, but 10 seems about right. I did about 10 squares while getting my hair retouched, which is why I was mentioning the hair. I lost my train of thought. But yeah, like, I was just getting my hair bleached. I was just sitting with the bleach and, like, all the processing and toning and everything. And I was just sitting there with my little squares, and I was just making them. And the tricky bit is like, I was, like, stuck in the chair, and they were, like, applying all the bleach, but, like, I only had one skein of yarn in my lap, and I just had to keep on, like, I didn't want to move and mess them up to, like, grab another one. So then I made 4 purple squares, and I was trying to make, like, 2 of each color, but yeah, there's another, I swear there's another 4th one. Yeah, and that's my anecdote. But I haven't entirely figured out what I'm going to be making with these squares. Like, if I wanted to make, like, 100 more, I can make a blanket, and I have been saying that I wanted a blanket for my room forever, and I just still don't know. I've been kind of nervous to make a blanket for my room just because, like, I like to wash, like, my sheets and everything, like, once a week, but, like, you obviously couldn't do that with a hand knit blanket. So I've been literally freaking out and, like, trying to figure out, like, should I just buy a store-bought blanket that I can wash, like, once or twice a week, or should I just make one because, like, that'd be a lovely touch for my home, but then I wouldn't be able to wash it that often because then it'll, like, literally take, like, 2 months to dry every single time. And so what I've done in compromise is I just don't have a blanket for my bed. I just have, like, the comforter, and that's it. And that's fine now that it's, like, almost spring and the weather's heating up, but, like, I just want you to know that, like, I didn't have a blanket all of winter just because I couldn't figure out whether I wanted to buy a store-bought or make my own blanket. And I have never made a blanket before, and I think that a crochet granny square, like, in all these pastels and bright colors that I've been using this past, like, spring, would be really, really fun. It would just be a lot of work, and I honestly think that I should probably just make, like, a sweater or a cardigan. Don't know which. Maybe a cardigan because it's kind of cute, and I honestly think that I don't make enough cardigans. I think a sweater or cardigan would be better just because I can make it with less squares, and I want to explore other crochet techniques and shapes now that I've mastered the granny square. I really only know how to make one, but at this point I think I need to finish it out and just continue to make the same type of granny square for, like, all of this whatever garment, blanket, homeware is going to be, and then I can start to work on other things because I really, really, really want to start making, like, more, like, layers, I guess, with crochet, because I think that's what's really great about crochet. I really love, I don't know what stitch it is, maybe it's double crochet, maybe it's treble crochet, I don't know if that's the right term, that's, like, really, like, airy and makes those really cute, like, squares. I want to make, like, one of those dresses, and I still need to learn how to read patterns. There's so many cool crochet designers, and I need to learn how to read patterns, but first I need to learn how to crochet anything but a granny square. But yeah, the point of this video is to just show you guys how I made a granny square, because I think that in all the video tutorials that I watched, there's a few things that I was confused about, or I just wish that they had shown more of. So I am just going to show you guys how I make a granny square from start to finish in, like, real time. I am so sorry you could hear me talking a lot, but I mean, hopefully those of you that are trying to learn how to granny square or learn how to crochet, this will be helpful. And keep in mind that I'm learning how to crochet having already known how to knit, so I'm sorry if I omit anything. I think the best way to learn something is to try to teach it to somebody else, and I guess we'll see. I'm so sorry if I fudge up the terms, and also, again, full disclosure, I am no expert on crocheting. I just learned how to do this. And so if you have any tips or suggestions, feel free to leave them in the comments. Like, I'm open to learning. Please be kind, though. Obviously, I'm trying to make this video with the best of intentions of just, like, sharing the journey of learning how to crochet with you. And yeah, let me just show you how I make a granny square. And so with the color scheme, I have a bunch of, like, greens and blues, and I'll show you all the ones that I've made so far, but I'm going to be making this next one in Sandnes Garn Kos in Jelly Bean Green. And yes, the label's still on it. This is a full skein, but I am just now I'm just like using all the yarn that I have in my stash now of this type. I still don't know what it's called. It's like a chain construction. It's honestly maybe not the best yarn to, oh my gosh, why can't I focus? It's probably not the best yarn to learn how to crochet a granny square with, just because it's kind of hard to rip out, and that's the beauty of crochet. It's really easy to rip up what you've done and just like restart. So I would actually recommend doing a plaid yarn at the very beginning before, when you're not so comfortable making the granny squares, because this yarn is sticky and it's hard to unravel. So I really recommend doing a like plaid yarn like this. Again, maybe in a brighter color so you can see the stitches, but I think that now that I've made like 25 granny squares, I'm pretty comfortable making them. I'm no expert, but I'm pretty comfortable, so that's why I can use the sticky yarn. And again, I'm going to be using an H hook or a 5mm hook. It's wooden. I know that some people prefer plastic or metal hooks. This is literally like one of 2 crochet hooks that I have. The other one's giant, and so I didn't want to start crocheting with a super bulky yarn. So this is just what I have on hand, and I'm actually pretty comfortable with it. And you might have other preferences. I actually prefer to knit with wooden needles, so that's why I gravitated towards the wooden hook. But feel free to play around. If it doesn't feel super comfortable for you, try plastic and try metal. See what works for you. I don't know for sure that I prefer wooden hooks, but this is literally the only like one of 2 crochet hooks that I have. So that's why I went with this one. Okay, I also have my white yarn, which is just Wool and the Gang Feeling Good yarn in Ivory White. It's great. It's very soft, and I just had a bunch of it. And here we go with this yarn. I'm just gonna pull. Actually, I find with crochet that I move fast enough where I actually like to pull from the outside, just because you can like take off a bunch of the yarn on the outside, just so you don't have to like be constantly like grabbing yarn. So I'm just gonna pull a bunch off here. This is just me and my preferences. This is not, I guess this is a recommendation. Okay, but let's start with the granny square. We're gonna go to the edge and we're gonna create a slip stitch. And so what that is you're just going to take the yarn, twist a little loop, and then pinch a loop through that other loop, I guess. And that's a slip knot. You could take that out easily. So again, you're going to twist and pull through, slip knot, slip stitch, slip knot. I'm sorry, I don't know all the terms. And you're going to place it on your hook. Don't make it too tight. And first things first, we're going to chain 3. And so chain 3 means that you're just going to be literally wrapping the yarn around the hook, and make sure the yarn goes to the back to the front, and then you're just going to pull it through. And I actually find that it's helpful to make the motion of like, so the hook doesn't catch on the top, you twist the hook through. And that's 1 chain, 2, and then 3. And that's how you chain 3. And you don't want to make this too tight or too loose. You want to keep a good tension, and I'm still figuring that out. I'm sorry, I don't really have any tips. And so first things first is we're going to create the little loop in the center. And so let me show you guys on this one. Yeah, I've woven in the ends for this one. So first things first, you start out in the middle of the granny square, and then you just slowly add corners, and it'll make sense as we go. So first things first, we're going to create that little loop literally in the center. And I like to think of making granny squares as you just like find the corners and then like add stitches. I'll be more articulate in a second. Wow, it looks so pretty. Anyways, so first we're going to create that little loop in the center. And so what we're going to do is we're going to go to the first chain, insert our hook, wrap it around, wrap the yarn around, and then pull it through. Just again, make sure that you don't pull too tight on anything, because it'll make everything more difficult in the future. So we pulled it through 1, and then we pull it through the second, and so we've now joined our loop, and we have that little circle in the center. And it looks a little hard to see now, but it will be easier in the future. Oh my gosh. And I'm just gonna make this a little bit easier for myself in the future, and just like kind of stick my finger through that just so I can see where it is and don't lose it. Okay, now we are going to work on the first corner. And so what we're gonna do is at the very beginning of each round, I guess, let me go back to this example. Each of these, like the rows in a granny square, are like the full circles. So they're like concentric circles basically, or concentric squares, because I guess it's a square. And you're just going to work on this first square circle here. And so on the very first one of every single row round, you're going to chain 2. And that's just how it is. I can't really explain why. So you're first going to do 1 and 2. And then now you're going to do 2 double crochets. And so in order to double crochet, you're going to wrap your yarn and insert it into the hole. Remember, this is the center of the circle. Wrap your yarn, pull through a stitch. So now you have 3 on your hook. And then you're going to wrap your yarn again, pull it through 2, and then wrap your yarn again and pull it to the last 2. So you have 1 stitch. So this is 1 double crochet. And so you can see here at this chain 2, 1 double crochet. We're going to do 1 more double crochet for this first corner. And then you're going to insert it into the same hole. And this is why we kind of open up the hole at the beginning, just because it's easier to insert our hook later. After the first corner, it's a lot easier, but that first one's kind of tricky. So double crochet. I'll do another slow-mo of double crochet in a second. Cool. And now we finished the first corner. And so I like to think of the transitions as chain 2. So now we're going to chain 2 to work on our next corner. And the chaining of 2, that sounds weird. The little chains in between are just like help us like do the turns, I guess, if that makes sense. So we went from one corner and now we're going to the next. So the little chains are our transition. So we've chained 2, but now we're going to do 3 double crochets. And so keep in mind that for the very first corner, you always do 1 chain 2, 2 double crochets, but for everything else, you're going to be doing it in 3s. Double crochets in 3s. Sorry, it's like 2s, 3s, doubles and stuff, but I guess that's just crochet, or maybe I'm just really boshing this. Anyways, so for a double crochet, we're going to wrap our yarn, insert it into the stitch, which in this case is the hole, pull through the yarn so that you have 3 on your hook, needle. You're going to wrap your yarn, pull it through 2, and then wrap your yarn and pull it through both. So that's 1. And we're just going to do that again. And it's tricky on the first round. Make sure you don't accidentally grab the tail from the slip stitch. That's 2. And that's 3. Cool. And so now you've finished the second corner. I guess I finished the second corner. If you're following along, you've also done it. And now we're going to do another transition. So chain 2. And we're going to do the next corner. So it's the exact same thing. 3 double crochets in a row. And again, the tail's really annoying on the very first row, but it gets easier in the future. You can also weave it in after this round. I obviously don't because I'm bad about that, but yeah. And so this is our third one. Oh my gosh, the tail. It's especially tricky with like sticky yarn. Yeah. And so if you're having trouble where you are, I find that it's helpful to start to identify where the chains were, so that's the transitional period. So you can start to see that the chains were more of a gap and they're more bendy, versus the double crochets are like slightly thicker. Let me bring that closer to the camera so you can see. So this is a chain, it also bends, and this is a double crochet, so that I know that this is a cluster of 3. 1, 2, 3. So I finished that corner. This one was the beginning corner, so it was only 2. And then this one here, I just did. This is the double crochet. It's like slightly bendier, it's thinner. There's a little gap that we're going to use later. 1, 2, 3. And if you forget how many you've done, we can see that we've done 1 corner, second corner, third corner. We need to do 1 more because there's 4 corners in a square. And so we're going to do the transitional period. 1, 2. And then we're going to wrap our yarn, insert. My gosh, the tail is driving me crazy this time. Maybe it's just because I'm going slower. Okay, anyways, I chain 2, wrap our yarn, insert through, yeah. I'm gonna move this out of the way, because I'm also filming this for real on the side, haha. And so, you're going to insert through. Oh, I grabbed the tail again. Oh my gosh. I swear, it's not normally this bad, but it must be just getting in the way this time. Okay. And then, now we can see that the square is kind of formed, and we are just going to chain 2, because that's our transitional thing. Move. And we're actually going to close up the square. And so you can see you're just going to go to the very top of that original chain stitch. And I'm not the best at identifying where that is. You're just going to wrap your yarn, and this is like a slip stitch to connect the chain twos together. And now you can see your square. And so now you're actually going to slip stitch, that's the word. You're going to slip stitch to the top of the first corner. And so slip stitch is just you insert your hook through the top of a stitch, you wrap the yarn, pull it through, and then you just pull it through the other stitch. So it doesn't really add anything, it just like moves where your working yarn is. And yeah, now we're ready to do our second round. Okay, we are at the top of our second round, and we are going to now do our corners a little bit differently. And so if you look on this one here, you can see that we just finished this little bit here in the center. Let me put it on top. You can see that center. And now we're going to start working on the second round, and you can see that the corners are a little bit thicker, so we're going to have to make 2 corners for each side. And so it's super simple, and I'll show you how I do it. So we're at the top here, and we're just going to chain 2 because it's our transition, beginning, corner, and stuff. And we're going to do, we've chained 2, we're going to do 2 double crochets into this first corner. 1, 2. And now we're going to do the second corner piece. So you can see that it's like only on one side. We're going to try to finish up that corner. And so we're going to chain 2 because we're transitioning to a new stitch, new cluster, I guess. And we're going to chain 3, or double crochet 3, sorry. 1, 2, 3. And so you can see that it's a corner here. And so we're going to chain 2 and move on to our next corner. And so you're going to be doing, I guess, 8 clusters in total, and only one of them is going to be chain 2, double crochet. Every other cluster will be 3 double crochets. So many words. And so we're just going to do 2 clusters of 3 double crochets. 1, 2, 3. And so it's really important, you're going to chain 2 to transition, that you insert into, when you're working on these double clusters, or these clusters, the 2 clusters for each corner, it's important that you insert into the same stitch / hole. Otherwise it'll look wonky. 1, 2. But I actually find that after you do the first stitch, it opens up the hole or the stitch, and it makes it a lot easier to work on the rest. So we're just going to do chain 2 because we finished our second corner here. We've done 2 clusters, and we're just going to work on our third corner. 1, 2. Oh gosh, this happens to me all the time. 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, we finished our first corner, so we're going to transition, or the first cluster in our corner. 1, 2. Oh my gosh, and this, I have to unravel some more yarn because I hate like pulling it as I'm going. 1, because it messes with my tension. 1, 2, 3. And so we finished our third corner, and we're going to work on our last one. And so, see how it's kind of ambiguous here? What I can do is I can count 1, 2, 3. I know that's one cluster, and then 1, 2, that's our beginning cluster. So the quarter, like, whole stitch is here. I definitely don't know the right terminology for that, but somebody in the comments can correct me. So it goes 1, 2, 3. Okay, and we're working on our last one now. So we're going to transition. 1, 2, 1. 2. Oh my gosh, this last. Oh my gosh. There we go. 1. This is the last one I know. 3. 2, 3. And then we're just going to chain 2. And we're going to connect the corners, or connect the sides. And so we're just going to slip stitch. Slip stitch, and then we're going to go to the top corner as well. And I'm not very good at figuring out where to slip stitch in particular. yeah, I just kind of find the top of the stitch, and maybe that's why things are a little bit wonky. Again, somebody can correct me. But that is the end of our second round. Okay, third round. And so we just finished this second one here. Second round, I guess. And now we're going to move on to the outer one. And so very similar to how we just did it, except now there's an extra stitch. So we have the 4 corners, 1, 2, 3, 4. But now we have these little spaces in between as well. We have 4 more extra spaces. And we're just going to throw in 1 extra cluster there. Not 3, just 1. And we're going to just throw in 1 extra cluster at each one instead of 2. Think of the need for 2 clusters only as the corners. Every time you find a new little gap, you're only going to fill it with 1 cluster. And same thing, you're going to transition with 2 chains. And yeah, let's just get into it. So first we're going to chain 2, because that's our beginning of corner row. And we're just going to do 2 double crochets. 1, 2, chain 2 for the other corner cluster. I find that with crochet, I am constantly counting. Yeah, because I at first found it really difficult to read like where I was within the granny square. And so I had trouble like figuring out where the clusters were and how many like stitches were in each cluster. I've gotten a lot better at identifying it, and I'm trying to teach you guys how to identify it, just to make it so that you don't have to be constantly counting, and if you lose track, it's like devastating. You have to unravel things. Yeah, but I definitely just count in crochet still even more than I do with knitting. So chain 2 here, and now we're going to go to this middle cluster, or this middle stitch hole first. So again, we're just going to do 1 cluster. So 3 double crochets, 2, that'll happen, and 3, and we're going to chain 2 and go to our second corner. And this one's a little ambiguous, but you go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, middle here, 2, and 3, chain 2, and work on our second cluster for this corner. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I didn't 1, 2, 3, and you're going to chain 2. It really helps for me, at least, to think about the chain 2s as like transitional movements. Like you're going to use it to transition to different clusters, different corners, different parts of the granny square. Also to transition to different rows or rounds of the granny square itself. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Yeah, that's something that I wish that I knew when I was beginning to crochet. If I knew all that I know now while beginning to granny square, I probably would have learned how to crochet a year ago. But this is just something that you learn to see. Yeah. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, chain 2, get more yarn. Because again, for me at least, it's easier for me to have just a bunch of like loose yarn and not have to pull it. Because if I have to pull it, it's gonna mess with my tension. And Lord only knows that I am not so good at keeping the tension with crochet already, so I need all the help I can get. Or maybe that would help me with my tension. I don't know. 1, 2. I am such a new crocheter that I don't even know if my tension is right. I assume that it's a little bit wonky just because like the squares themselves aren't like perfect. And that's alright. I'm learning. 1, 2, 3. And 2. And I actually find that it's kind of helpful sometimes to just like take a second to see where you are in the square. That way you don't like lose track of where you are and start to add like random corners and places. And so I can see that we just have 1 more corner to go. 1 more corner and 1 more middle piece. 1, 2. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, chain 2. Just constantly sanity check. Oh, there's the New York bells, honks. Just constantly sanity check yourself, just so that you can figure out where you are and you start to get an eye for things. And you go 1, 2. Oof. And I can see that this is my last middle bit here. And so I'm just going to do one more cluster. 1, 2, 3. And then chain 2 to close up the square. This like tail is driving me crazy this time. I swear it normally doesn't, but this time around it is. Just gonna go top of the chain and slip, and then slip to the top. And I'm actually gonna switch to the white yarn here because this is where the border is. And so in order to finish off this color, you just take your scissors, cut the yarn, and then just wrap the yarn and pull it through entirely. And that is how you finish off with colors. I don't know if that's right. I never looked it up. That's just how I've been doing it. Please, please tell me if there's an easier way. And yeah, this is the base of our granny square. All right, now we're going to be adding in the white border. And so if we go back to our example, we've already done this middle bit here, and now we're just going to be doing the white border. And exact same thing as the last row, except now there's an extra middle bit, so we're gonna have to do 2 middle clusters, I guess. Again, you only do 1 cluster per middle stitch. Yeah, let's get into it. So how do I add the white border, you ask? I don't know if this is the right way to do things, but this is how I've been doing it. And I've been really procrastinating on weaving in all the ends because there's a lot of ends to weave in. So that's why quite a few of my granny squares have like tails and ends to weave in. I find that it's actually easier to weave in crochet pieces, like the ends for the crochet pieces, because I think that the stitches are a lot thicker, so it's easier to hide in ends than it is for knitting. But just because it's easier doesn't mean that I want to do it. I'm just trying to like set up my yarn here, and the yarn's getting tangled and it's sticky. Oh god. Okay. Anyways, let me pause and figure this out. Okay, I have figured it out. And so the way that I like to add in the new color is we take the tails, we tie them together. And the reason I do this is just so that it's like I'm not stressed about accidentally pulling through the end on my very first stitch. And I try to make that as close to the corner as possible. And I make sure this is the right side that I'm facing. It is, because the little tail that I've been fighting with this entire time is back there. And what I'll do is, there's more tails for me to worry about, but let's not worry about that yet. I'm going to hold down the 2 tails, and I'm just going to insert my hook into the stitch and pull through the new yarn. And now I'm ready to chain 2, and we're going to work as normal. This is our corner, so we're just going to, I'm going to hold back the other tails so I don't mess with them. 1, 2, 1, 2, or that's 1. This is 2. And now we're ready for the other corner cluster. 1, 2. And this is how you do the border. And you could also just do the same color if you want to just make the granny square bigger. And as you, basically each subsequent round row, oh god, I should figure out what it is. It's just the same thing where you're just adding more middle stitches, and you just need to make sure that you're getting them. 1, 2, 3. And so the last row we had 2 or 1 middle stitch. Now we have 2. I assume for the next one, I've never made a granny square bigger than this, is going to be 3 middle stitches, and yeah. And you're just going to do a cluster. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. That was 2. This is 3. I don't know why I'm counting this way. Chain 2. Talking out loud and crocheting has been quite the journey. I swear I can normally do these in like 10 to 15 minutes each. I think it's been longer than that, but I blame it on the fact that I'm trying to teach / show you guys how I do it at the same time. 1, 2. 1, 2. I used to actually teach coding, and so hopefully some of my teaching skills have transferred over to crafting. But trying to live code and teach at the same time was like always when you like forgot the most basic things. And I think that the same principle applies here, where I would forget the most basic terms. Not that I even really knew the terms in the first place. Yeah, I found like free crochet patterns online. just because I want to work up to learn how to read them, and they're just like literally for granny squares or like different types of granny squares. And I'm just trying to learn how to read them first, and I just do not know any of the abbreviations, so I keep on having to go back to like the keys. Yeah, it's definitely hard going from like knowing really how to knit. Not that, again, I don't really know what my knitting level is considered. I would hope advanced, but I really don't know. Oops, missed a stitch there. 1, 2, 3. But it's hard to go from like somewhat advanced knitting or very familiar with knitting to absolute beginner with crochet. But I gotta learn somewhere, and I'm gonna have all summer. I'm gonna give myself all summer to learn how to crochet, because crochet pieces are really fun for the summer. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, also, like, this is showing you guys and like placing the camera and stuff. I'm like crocheting slightly further away from my body than I normally would, and so my arms are getting tired and my back's a little tired, but I'm almost done. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. We're getting there, guys. We're getting there. Yeah, but yeah, look at that. Isn't that pretty? Okay, so then we're just gonna do this next cluster here. 1, 2, 3. And I've gone through so much of this like feeling good yarn, just like adding borders on everything, but yeah, very fun. I really like that the borders look like this. This is not even the first crochet project that I've attempted with granny squares within the last week. I also tried to make a bag with that original like Madeline Tosh yarn that I was working with. And then I kind of lost enthusiasm for it, because then I was like, let me just mess around and make like a single granny square in a color and like add a cute little white border. And then I lost all motivation for that other like bag. So I have all the squares done basically, and I don't know what to do. I guess I could always go back to it, but I've lost momentum on it. Here we go. Here's a big old yarn knot. I don't know how much of my life I have spent untangling yarn, but it is far, far too much. And like, you know, sometimes you just have to give up and like cut the knot out, and sometimes you finally get it, but after how much untangling, I don't know. Oh gosh, this might be like a pause and untangle moment. Oh, maybe not. No, I think it is. Okay. 1, 2. Okay, back to this. But you guys are kind of getting stream of consciousness crocheting, talking right now, because I really do want to show you how to make the entire square in real time without cutting any corners. 1, 2. But I also don't know what to say always. So chain 2, and we're on the last 2 clusters, so soon I won't have to say anything. 1. And you might notice that the light just shifted. It's a cloudy day here in New York. We had a weird heat wave where it was like 80 degrees or 89 degrees, and it was awful because like it was April and I wasn't really prepared for that type of heat yet. But now we're back down to like the highs of like 60s, and it's been very pleasant, and I think it's actually raining today. I was in Central Park doing a little knitting actually, and a bunch of pollen fell on me. 1, 2. Okay, this is the last bit, so we're just going to connect it here, slip stitch it to connect, and then I like to slip stitch to the corner. And then at one point I was slip stitching all around just to like make it a little bit more even, but I've gotten lazy and I don't like to do that, and I actually find that I didn't really add anything. So what I'm going to do here instead is I'm going to cut the yarn and I'm just going to pass it through. And I would love any tips that you guys have on how to clean up the edges, but I figured that I would just be stitching everything together, so it didn't really matter. Like, I'm going to be like putting these two together, so it doesn't really matter if the edges are super neat. Or maybe that makes it easier to put them together. I don't know. But yeah, that is the entire granny square. And I have made like 25 of these now, or 26. But these are all the squares that I've made so far. I kind of went crazy with it, and I think that they look so pretty. And there's quite a few that I haven't added the borders to. That'll take me like an extra 5 minutes each, hopefully. I need to make another orange one. I'm in the middle of that. But yeah, I'm thinking that this will be a cardigan. Maybe sweater. Probably not blanket. Don't know yet. And that is all I want to show you today. I realized that filming, making a granny square in real time will take a lot of this video, so I don't want to make it too long. And I actually still haven't decided what I want to make with all of these granny squares, because obviously I've made a ton. And I will just keep on making them and eventually decide what to do, and I will just show you guys what my first like real crochet project becomes. But thank you so much for watching. Hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and happy crocheting, I guess.